Hello.
Hello.
How are you, Jonathan?
I'm doing well, thank God.
How was your week?
My week was relaxing.
That's
Pleasant.
good. I'm glad to hear. We missed you last week.
Yeah, did you broadcast last week?
No, actually, 2 weeks
Week
ago.
week
Last week.
prior, yeah.
Um, okay, so it was a good week, productive. I'm glad to hear.
Not productive actually. Vacation.
That's a different
So different
type
productive.
of productivity.
That's right. Restful.
So how is that working? Is it like vacation, like I'm not going to work, or vacation like the kids, the wife, we're all vacationing?
Left the kids with grandma, and the wife and I went down to the Caribbean for a little while.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so had a nice trip.
And do you feel, I mean, there was like a build up until the vacation actually came, and now the vacation came. Do you feel like I got to just veg, explore, reconnect? Like, did it do what it needed to do? Do you feel
Yeah, I think
rejuvenated?
so. I mean, there's always a lot of logistical things, ducks to get in a row before you go on a trip
Mm-hmm.
at in my life phase. Um, so yeah, it takes a little time to like get into the spirit, and then you come back and re-enter, and yeah. But I think it did its job.
My wife and I were supposed to go to Capri on October 8th, which obviously that didn't end up working out. But it was going to be our first vacation without the kids. Well, since the kids were born, really.
Yeah.
So it's been a while. But I promised my wife we'll of course still go again, just while things calm down a little. It's also less about like, I could even tell myself like I would go on vacation. It's more about like things heat up, coming back, things like that. I'd rather be local. Uh, I'm gonna wait another minute just to see if anyone hops on, and then we'll take it away. I know Sandy wanted to join. I know he was thinking of joining. There's Sandy. Hello.
Hey.
I know people say a claim like there's a common phrase, right? Speak of the devil, but in Hebrew, if you see someone you were just talking about, you say, "Too bad I wasn't talking about the Messiah." So I like using the other. I think the other version is a little more appropriate. Sandy, how you doing?
Okay. Yeah, right. I'm having a bit of a day, but I've got it under control.
I'm glad to hear. We're sending you strength to whatever specifically you need. Hopefully you receive it. And while there's some things we're going to learn, well, there's always things to learn from the Torah. Like I was saying, like today's class is like a little less, I was going to say there's a little less meat. There's actually a lot of meat, but there's, as far as our spiritual sustenance, I don't know if we're necessarily going to get all of it over here, but regardless, it's amazing to be together. I could share some interesting news. Rabbi Shirky, he sent out this letter to. I think I posted it also on the Discord, but he sent out a letter to many different, thousands of different addresses in the Arab world, different universities, different imams, and he was having a discussion saying, the time has come to recognize Israel and see us in the Quran not as the El Yahud, but as the Bnei Israel that have returned to their land. He speaks about how if you'd like the only way there's going to be recognition from Jewish people of Muhammad is only if there's none of this talk about he's here to replace Moses, and that there's the tahrif, which means that we have a fake version of the Torah. He says, like, obviously we can't even start a conversation if you guys are not gonna. And he offers different readings of how even in Islam tradition, you don't necessarily have to see as Muhammad as someone bringing a new religion. Rather, he is bringing the religion of Moses, or the Torah of Moses. He's bringing, not the religion, he's bringing the Torah of Moses to to his people. So it's culturally written and packaged specifically for them. Like we've spoken about in the past about how in the Noahide world, people are going to express it a little differently. And he mentions there how while the Rambam sees them as someone who is not considered idol worshippers, and in theory, they are under the rubric of keeping the 7 Noahide laws. The way they express them at times are not proper. There's also an interesting distinction over there where he talks about how, while with the Christians, according to some, we see them as idol worshippers. However, we could have a conversation with them because they don't deny our fundamental traditions and texts. With Islam, while we see them as not idol worshippers because they believe in the unification of God, however, because they deny our text, we can't really have a discussion there so much. Either way, he sent this letter out. He said that he received actually positive feedback, but due to the sensitive nature of Islam in this sense, these things are under the radar. I would also mention that he talks about how Christianity and Judaism can assist Islam in jumpstarting its ijtihad, which is their version of their oral text, of their oral Torah, and how they could try to modernize the sacred while maintaining a sacred position, which of course our rabbis have been doing for generations. And the offer was, we could assist you in doing that and still maintaining your sacred text. He was recently in Saudi Arabia, and either early this week or just last week, he got back, and he said that I'm waiting to hear more information, but he was flabbergasted by the things he was hearing them say in a positive sense, of things he wouldn't hear Muslims say. So hopefully these things will continue to grow and expand. And I was going to sort of follow up and asking you guys if you felt, and I've got, it's always important to mention that if you felt like you needed some assistance, or maybe just bring Antonio in over here, or if there's some sort of literature or some sort of stuff that you felt like you needed for yourself or in some sort of community building, of course, reach out, let us know, see how we could help. Because ultimately, while this is a magical space that we have with regard to this community online, we obviously on the ground, we have to try to try to build some sort of community where, again, you could feel like you could have the sort of support system that you need. So if anyone thinks of something that they could specifically need or need the rabbi's help to sort of engage in something, so of course, do not hesitate to reach out. On that note, I want to welcome Antonio. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how's it going?
Thank God. Antonio, can I share? Well, we'll do that maybe later. I'll talk about the comments over here. Just I'm in tree. We have Jason over here. So Jason, fantastic to have you here and feel welcome to join. Neil here as well, the ever elusive Neil. I'm trying to lock down a conversation with him. So far, he's been a pleasure in this little corner. So it's very nice to see him over here. And he, of course, also is welcome to join. And without further ado, let's get cracking with our Chapter 8, not to get confused with, we talked about 7 Noahide laws and how we're in Chapter 8. Rather, the first chapter wasn't really, if you remember, that wasn't one of the first laws, so split differently. But either way, we are here with animals, or the prohibition of eating a limb from a living animal, which in English, in Hebrew, is ever min hachai. And I would say in this class, there's going to be a lot more reading, which sort of a lot of this is sort of self-explanatory, and we'll discuss a little. But without further ado, Jonathan, can I trouble you to read some of these verses, which is just grounding us and putting us in the context of where we have these commandments. And this is happening, of course, during conversations with Adam and Eve and conversations with the descendants of Noah after the flood. So by all means, take us there.
And as for me, I will establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living soul that is with you, of the bird, of cattle, and of every living animal upon the earth with you. Genesis 9:9-10. And then every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, as with the green herbs, I have given you all these. However, you shall not eat flesh whose blood is still in its soul. Genesis 3:3 and 4.
I think that's wrong, actually. I don't think that's Genesis 3:4. I think that should be in Genesis. Whatever. We'll look at. I'm writing this down. I'll look at this later.
It's in Genesis.
Okay, go on.
On that day, I will make a covenant with the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the creeping things of the ground. I will also banish bow, sword, and war from the land. Thus, I will let them lie down safely. From Hosea.
So it's interesting. In Hosea, we have like a different, like a Hosea. We're talking about Endgame over here, where we could see that we're putting down the sword, the bow, and in a certain sense, also it's sort of allowing you that this is a peaceful time for the animals, potentially also hinting on our relationship with the animals changing as well. So just some overview. The commandment of ever minachai, right? Not eating from the liver of a living animal. It's really here to distinguish between the fact that animals are eating for survival, sort of indifferent, sort of the taste, right? It's not like it's a Monday. I've had too much antelope today. They're always down for antelope. And with regards to humans, we are trying to move beyond just like exploitation or just eating for survival. Rather, aside from, let's say, the aesthetic experience, which goes already further, we are trying to transform the living flesh in a certain sense. This also, we have to deal with a certain tension over here, which is when we're looking at an animal, and again, we're only touching lightly upon this, while humans have a neshama, a soul, which I'm sure is a word you've heard before, animals have a spirit, which is more like a nefesh. These are, while they sound familiar, these are different. And of course, we have God breathing in the breath of the life into us. And this is highlighted by the human's higher soul level, which is, associated with our moral consciousness, our intellectual ability, our capacity to have, types of relationships. So of course, these are different in a certain sense. This, of course, leads us, and if someone watched what I posted on Friday, then I'm sorry if I'm going to repeat it again, but this relates to a famous essay by Rav Kook called Chazon HaTzimchonut. This is like the vision of vegetarianism. And in a sense, he explains that while at a certain level, we are trying to remove human barbarity from human on human to human on animal, right? To lower the degrees of how we are maintaining and trying to control this human attribute that we have. But ultimately, we want to move to a place where even with the animals, we are living in a peaceful relationship. And he posits that as we all, in the times of Messiah, elevate ourselves, there's a sense where even animals themselves are elevated, and our relationship with them changes, where we no longer have the need to eat these animals. This could be manifest through the fact that now we're getting to a level with technology where we could, we're making meat from stem cells, laboratory grown meat. The rabbis in Israel decided that this would be considered parv, as a not considered actual meat, which has, of course, dietary restriction ramifications, eating meat and milk together, which is quite fascinating. So it might manifest that way. It might manifest in the sense where they're using AI on dolphins, they recognize that dolphins all have different names for each other in different languages, and parrots call themselves different names. Who knows where that relationship goes? Of course, do we see later down the line that we recognize more about how mushrooms are working and how the animals are working, and maybe there's another level of respect that we need to have, or sensitivity or relationship we could have with animals. Having said that, there is a sense where sacrifice of animals and consumption of animals could still be happening, but as long as it's happening with the proper orientation and partnership. And the Midrash gives us a story about this with the prophets, the famous argument between the false prophets of Baal and Elijah on Mount Carmel. And there we have two altars that are built, and we're going to see who the true God is. And Jeremiah goes to the prophets and tells them, please bring me 2 bulls, both that are related from the same family. So you can't say that, one is better than the next, and bring them here. And then he takes his bull, which goes straight with him to the altar of God, towards God. And as far as the bull for the false prophets, the bull doesn't want to budge, doesn't want to move. And Jeremiah engages and discusses with him, and the bull expresses his fear. And he says, it's not fair because I'm being used to sacrifice for idol worship, while your bull, my brother, was used for worthy cause, being sacrificed for God. And Jeremiah needs to tell him that while it is true that you're being used by the false prophets, having said that, by not being consumed, you will be proving God's point, and that's why it's still a worthy cause. And what's interesting is that the rabbis, the sages, were trying to stress to us that it didn't bother the bull that he was being slaughtered. Rather, he wanted to know that it was being done for a worthy cause. And that is to remind us that as long as we are doing it properly and we are elevating this and this experience, then that in theory can be still considered divine and happen in a sense where I'm not taking advantage of the animal. Of course, this should ring a bell or create associations with the Native Americans, obviously hunting animals, understanding, the spirit of the animal, taking that with them. So there's a very old sense, and this was also true during the time of the prophets, where you could feel divinity, the spiritual realm around you at all times. Today, of course, while we are highly enlightened, we are deaf in a certain sense to seeing God all around us, even in animals. So with that explanation, we will move forward. Jonathan, can I ask you to take on the overview, which is in number 1?
Yeah, can you scroll down a little bit? I can read it off the screen.
Of course. Sorry about that.
No worries. Okay. Yeah. The Torah permitted humans to feed themselves with every type of plant life, as it is stated. God said, behold, I have given you every seed-bearing plant that is upon the surface of the entire earth, and every tree which has seed-bearing fruit, it shall be yours for food. And humans were also permitted to eat many types of animals, as it is stated, and the fear and the dread of you shall be upon every animal of the earth, and upon every bird of the sky, of all that moves upon the ground, and of all fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, as with the green herbs I have given you all these.
Right. So here again, we're being told that this is nevertheless, with the explanation I gave, on the ground at this level of humanity and at this levels of interpretation of the game we're playing, the divine game we're playing, we obviously are still allowed to eat animals. But again, this is all happening in the context of Ever Menachai, where we're trying to understand and respect the relationship we have with animals. Just to be clear, I have never slaughtered an animal. There are rabbis that, of course, do this, A, in part of their training, B, sometimes because they need to do so for their community. But from what I know, it is definitely not a pleasant experience. And while we're trying to constantly minimize the amount of suffering we're doing, one does have to ask, with regards to the fast food culture or the massive culture that you have today with food, is that something, regardless, that we should try to tone down? Having said that, like, a good burger is a good burger, right? So I'm caught between worlds over here, but we need to, of course, take those things up. Matthew, good to see you, sir. Okay, number 2, Sandy, you don't mind reading?
Sure. The Torah prohibited eating a limb from a living animal, or in other words, any part of an animal that is taken from it while it was still alive, as it states. However, you shall not eat flesh whose blood is still in its soul. The prohibition applies even after the animal whose flesh was detached, while it was still alive, has died.
Right. So we're getting into fortunately and unfortunately, we could see the warm and cold halakha sort of deal with you could see over here, they're sort of, as they're writing this, they're not really concerned already at the point of was the animal sad or was it not? Now we're really talking about cold facts of how would we look at this? We want to obviously avoid fact of detaching or slaughtering it while it's alive. And here we're bringing a little breakdown with regards to even after, again, I'll just read this. A prohibition applies even after the animals whose flesh was attached while it was still alive has died, right? So like at this point it's dead and we no longer have that that tension of I'm eating it while the animal itself is still alive, while you would think maybe there's a difference with that regard. Number 3, among the reasons why eating flesh from a living animal is forbidden is to distance humanity from brutality, as we mentioned earlier, pursuit for lustful pleasures and impulsivity, right? Because I want to see a footnote over here, 259 Maharal, Elusheva Mitzvot, right? He mentions over there as well. Okay. As we were saying, there's also, anytime we see impulsivity, this is also a hint or alluding to the fact of few steps down the line, you end up in idol worship. Because once you start having this lack of control over yourself, then very quickly, all the things that you desire and you want immediately. And then you start going down to those things are starting to control you. You're no longer someone that's following his intellect. Rather, you're allowing your emotions to fully take over you. And at that point, you are putting them as the highest point. And then that becomes your God for all intents and purposes. So we always are trying to avoid people losing themselves. We spoke about this a little in a Pirkei Avot class, but in the temple, of course, that is the place where one could let himself go within a structure. And this obviously also reminds us of Jordan Peterson, Chaos and Order, being on that line of Chaos and Order where you are allowed to express yourself, like King David dancing in front of the ark when it's coming back, while it's still happening in a controlled context, so to speak. Okay. Number 4, it is forbidden to eat a limb of a living animal, but it is permissible to make use of it. For example, as food for dogs. So again, I would say that this is still wrong, but at the end of the day, we're still talking about a halachic facts over here. So one is direct and one is indirect. So once it's indirect, we obviously have, there's less of that stress, less of that tension. So here in a sense, you would be able to be giving it for your dog as well. The prohibition of eating a limb. Sorry, go ahead, Sandy.
Sorry, question. Between points 2 and 4, then it sounds like
2 and 4. Okay.
I think it was. Yeah, because in 2 it's talking about not eating flesh. Should not eat flesh whose blood is still in its soul. So that would still apply in essence if you give it to a dog, but there's something different in the place of a dog or the place of another animal between the animals that's different than that between us and the animal. And that's curious to me. And that's the only
go ahead.
That's the only difference I really see is you'd started out by talking about the different levels of, like that we have souls and that they have spirit.
Well, in a certain sense, sorry, go ahead, Sandy. I thought you were done. Sorry.
No, you're going to say it anyway. Go ahead.
I was going to mention that if we said earlier that we want to distinguish between us and the animal, right? The animal doesn't think about it. So here, in a certain sense, it's like it's a more elevated level. The animal my dog would have just bit it, right? In this sense, I killed it in a more humane fashion. Now we're saying while I can't eat it right away because we have this issue, but if I'm now giving it to a dog, again, it's not ideal, but it's already indirect. It's not happening to me. Second of all, it's already happening with an animal, which is already at a level of sort of natural barbarity that we ourselves are trying to remove ourselves from. But as far as the animal itself, that wouldn't be as problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right. Antonio, do you want to give us 5 and 6?
Prohibition of eating a limb from a living animal pertains to birds as well. However, in this case, violation of the prohibition does not result in any punishment. An animal or a bird that is still convulsing even after it has been slaughtered is still considered alive as long as it has not ceased all movement.
Okay, right. So unfortunately, very, very specific. With regards to the birds, So in a certain sense, again, like a little more distant from us, and again too. So it's less of an issue. Whether or not, I can't tell you if, like, on the intelligent levels of birds or not. Like, obviously we know dolphins are very smart, but like, maybe we'll find out that there's some, the dodos tricked us all and they're still alive. But seemingly this is what the rabbis are suggesting. And as far as the convulsing, this again is a technical term, but we are again trying to show how we are being sensitive to this, which is we don't want to engage in this act until the life has left, right? Once the life is still there, it's just a space where we don't want to put ourselves in the middle of that, and we don't want to. And again, we always have this tension. We are the ones that are obviously causing this, right? By hunting it, by killing it. But again, there's a sense where we want to do so in the most humane way possible. And of course, people could say, just don't eat food at all. So I understand that. That's always going to be out there. If the head of the animal is removed, it is permissible to eat the animal, even if it's still convulsing. That's because we know for a fact at that point that the animal is dead, right? So even if it's convulsing, that is just neurons being shot, or not neurons at that point, but rather more, just the nerves still reacting to that. But that's no longer. We know there's no longer any even an animal level worth of consciousness going on at that point. So again, halachically, we are not concerned at that point consuming the animal. Moving on, Jonathan, can I trouble you? Giving us 8 and 9.
Yeah. This prohibition applies to any quantity of flesh that is eaten. Heart, tendons, and skin from domesticated and wild animals, bird feathers, horns, and hooves are not included in the prohibition of eating a limb from a living animal, because it is not customary for humans to eat them. But the skin of a pig and all other stuffed animal skins taken while the animal was still alive, since they are customarily eaten, are forbidden for consumption.
All right, so now I would wonder over here about but the skin of a pig and all soft animals taken while the animals are alive, like would that well, I guess the rabbis answered that us, but like I would say, like as far as stem cells and things like that, like how low does the level go with what you could take from the animal to then reproduce? And then is it like if that I guess you could just take it from I'm not a biologist, of course, so I'm just thinking out loud with you guys, that I guess that would be a question where one has to really see and obviously speak to a rabbi and speak to a scientist. But again, here is just giving us general prohibitions with regards to what we need to be careful about. I don't know if you guys are aware of any food that has hooves or horns in it or things like that, but I'm assuming on my kosher diet there isn't. I don't know what you guys have experienced in your life, but I think they make some sort of chips from pigskin, don't they?
Pork rinds.
Oh, well, there you go. So they have those.
Chicharrones.
Are they great?
Yeah, they're good.
Salty. It's salty.
Like chips, kind of.
I don't know. Someone once told me what a kosher equivalent is, but like I feel like, how does he know? All right, moving on. 10. This prohibition does not apply to insects, fish, or grasshoppers. That is, any cold-blooded animal whose blood is not considered separate from his flesh, and even though it is permitted to eat them while they are alive, it is preferable to kill them first in order to not cause them to suffer. Okay, so here we can see, like, we're not trying to cause them to suffer. Even these things are considered like insects over here. This also relates to, if I have a mosquito next to me, unless it's really bothering me, there's no real reason for me to be killing it, unless, of course, there's some sort of malaria outbreak, and then, have at it. But here, too, we see the Torah is being sensitive even to insects, as we call God Rachum, merciful, or Rahmana, the merciful one in Aramaic. But that's also true with regards to, again, even these little tiny animals. People also, when we buy, for example, lettuce is somewhat, this is something Yosef and I discussed even on the Discord. While there's a lot of food today that comes packaged and kosher, I don't have to worry about. When I get lettuce, I have it soaked in hot water and some vinegar to, sometimes there's like real little bugs over there that you want to try to remove, of course, and get rid of. There is a tradition with the Yemenite Jews that still eat grasshoppers. That tradition has been lost to the Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jews, but they still have this tradition, which is also very interesting. And I think there was like recently they were saying how, I think like Bill Gates was talking about how the whole world needs to move into like eating insects or grasshoppers because like they have a tremendous amount of protein on it, and that will save us from global warming. So God knew all this time that's what was supposed to happen. We're supposed to go back to eating these grasshoppers. Number 11, it is permissible to clean the wound of another person by sucking blood from the wound, right? So someone would have a question, how can I do that? First of all, I think sucking out the blood has been like already been, didn't they decide that's like a myth? That's like a big mistake to do that ultimately if there's like venom. But I guess if to save someone's life, just make sure you don't have any cuts in your mouth. But of course, saving someone's life comes first. And as we said many times, if I know I could save his life, not only is it permissible, but rather that is the commandment to do so. It will be a mitzvah to suck that blood out. Now you have to ask questions. If you're sucking out this blood and spitting into a little glass of champagne to save for later, then obviously there's other issues you need to deal with. But generally speaking, we of course want to be saving someone's life. Number 12, medications that contain components that include flesh taken from a living animal are permissible. I don't know of flesh that's taken from a living animal. I know that I wouldn't eat. There's like fish skin that you could put on your skin if you have burns that apparently help, but that's not putting it. But regardless, just like we said in number 11, it's no longer food at that point, right? It's already transformed into something else. So there's a categorical issue which we don't have to deal with. Second of all, if it's for saving someone's life, like we said earlier, then of course, in theory, it would be a no-brainer. I guess you could ask if this is just, I don't know, like Joe Rogan's alpha brain, right? If inside he has like some of his elk stuff, then maybe you could say like, is that really considered medicine? Why are you taking this? So maybe there could be an issue. Or you could say that it's no longer considered food. Is this a problem at that time? And I guess what the ingredients would be, right? There is an issue with eating Mentos because it's made out of gelatin, which is made out of like pig bones, crushed bones. And according to many in Orthodox circles, fish gelatin is okay because the fish is kosher. Pig gelatin would be a no bueno. However, there are some that say that is no longer considered that food anymore. It's no longer considered that meat, and that's why that would be permissible. Obviously, if you had gelatin inside of medicine, then you could rely on both of those opinions, and at that point, you're home clear. We are on 13. Yes, 13. Food in which a limb is taken from a living animal is mixed informally throughout the food, as long as it's a minority of the mixture, it is permissible to eat. This is a concept in Judaism called batel b'shishim, right? Which is like it's canceled out 1 out of a 60th, and in a sense, it disappears. You don't even feel it. It doesn't have an effect on the majority. We're not going to let one bad apple spoil all this. If the ratio makes sense. Here in with regards to the Noahide obligation, we don't have this necessary specific measurements like we were talking about earlier, that the Noahides don't have to be concerned with the exact measurements that the Torah gives, rather that what you would consider like what an agreed upon informal amount would be, right? If the color has changed right now and the taste has changed, obviously we have an issue. If a little piece of garlic, if the little piece fell inside and it doesn't matter, then of course, it's not an issue. And like we said earlier with like the dog, there's like sort of this degree of separation at that point. And again, the prohibition is less intense. In the case where there is a doubt as to whether a particular food is in fact a limb taken from a living animal, we assume that it is permissible, since most of the food that we eat is not taken from a living animal. Right, so we want to here assume the best. We want to assume that that's not what you have. Again, it has to do with the context. If I'm walking out, I don't know, I'm forgetting the name of the pig chip you were talking about, but if I'm walking out of that factory and I have this shirt on and I have the hat on and I have all the swag and I give you the bag, I guess you could assume that that's what it is. But in other cases, that's not what you have to assume. We need to assume that the person that's giving this to me is aware of this, and generally speaking, this is more of a rarity, and that's why I wouldn't be in those circles, or be exposed, take a chance being exposed to such a food. It is forbidden to cause animals suffering without any positive purpose or without any direct benefit to the human being, right? So we mentioned this earlier on in the context. So this is just the general underlying principle of everything we're reading right now. We rather avoid this unless this is benefiting us, obviously for medicine, or, for example, for spiritual gain. One would ask, of course, what about sports? I'm playing polo, I'm racing, so and I'm obviously hunting. So Judaism obviously it does not look very kindly at that. I think there's almost no one that is really allows for hunting as far as sports. And with regards to just sports with animals, then they create a tremendous amount of stress on the animal. I guess you could argue, I don't know, I'm just thinking someone could argue that having the horse race makes him, I don't know, happier, and then he could breed better. So like, if someone wants to, offer that argument, then obviously the Torah is always willing to listen if things make sense. Or the rabbis are willing to listen, but generally speaking, and we have to ask ourselves, as far as the culture, are we okay with that? Right. And then it benefits me to have medicine. Great. Does it benefit me to have like the new version of the Head and Shoulders? I don't know. I don't know if we should be testing that out, like the glow in the dark bunnies or the gay frogs that Alex Jones is talking about. Like, do we need that in our life? That's not a joke. I think he really did say something like that. And on the flip side, also Elon Musk with his monkeys playing computer games and his Neuralink, right, allowing the blind to see or allowing the deaf to hear would be a game changer, right? So in that sense, also we have to take that into consideration. I don't know. Do we want 1,000 dead monkeys? These are questions that we need to ask. And of course, like we said, with AI, the more we start learning about them, the way Chazal, the rabbis, talk about them, or chimpanzees are Adnei Hasadeh, the masters of the field. This is obviously very old, but there was a sense where we have to try to understand what is this thing that is clearly an animal, but also a lot more sophisticated. And scientists and rabbis, of course, have to work in collaboration when dealing with this and not be scared of this. Number 16, it is forbidden to eat human flesh. So this would be, we spoke about this also when dealing with the killing. Of course, there's the famous soccer team that was abandoned, that their plane crashed. They had to eat their teammates. Of course, to save your own life, this would be permissible, not to eat him while he's alive, right? No cannibalism. But once Joe kicks the bucket, then in theory, you'd be able to eat him. I don't know if there would be a need for you to say a blessing beforehand, right? I think just get it over with as quickly as possible. Maybe you should just be thanking God that he's allowing you to live. Of course, this is very, very traumatic. And a more positive sense of looking at this is, can I be an organ donor? Can I use my body parts to allow to sustain someone else? According to many in the Orthodox world, this is permissible. Not only is permissible, it is advised. And if one could do so after he is killed or dies, then that would be great to be able to save a life. There are some in the ultra-Orthodox communities that are against this. May they be enlightened soon. 17, where human life is in danger, it is permissible to eat every food that the Torah forbids, right? So this is quite obvious, like we were talking beforehand. 18, all parts of the body of an animal are permissible after its death, including the intestines. So I have never had testicles. I've never had brain. I've never had tongue, but there are people that say they are fantastic. And I guess, as they say, in Yiddish, sei gesund. You could enjoy, you could eat. If you like that, then by all means, you could partake. Again, the question would be, once we realize what these animals doing, should we be eating the brain or not? I was also just going to say about the flesh, about the human flesh. I know I said that was obviously it's sort of it's sort of easy for us to assume that that's like a non-starter. Having said that, ideas of vampires, and you have in Silicon Valley people doing infusions from like young people, blood infusions. And I even think, unfortunately, there is science that, and this is far out of my my knowledge or my training, but apparently there even is some indication that children's blood is potentially beneficial for older people in rejuvenating them. And then you have to ask yourself as a society, like, whoa, maybe it's great that we still have these laws with us that remind us that even if that was true, or even if that was that sense where the warrior bathes himself inside blood to be rejuvenated, right? While the Torah understands that deep richness of power, right? While we're sensitive about the animal bleeding, why we look at the blood as a nefesh, so we are aware of this hidden power inside blood, we of course want to completely refrain from that. So not that I would accuse anyone here or in this Discord or really in this little corner from participating in anything like that. That is not something that we could just ignore, because humans out there, the transhumanists and things like that, people could look at this as science, and we could quickly find ourselves in a very questionable moral place. Proper conduct. Jonathan, can you take us through 1 and 2?
The sages of Israel were divided regarding the status of blood from a living animal, that is, blood taken from an animal that is still alive. Practically speaking, it is permitted, but blessings will come to those who are stringent in this matter, and it is appropriate to refrain from eating blood even from an animal that was already slaughtered. Noahides are not obligated to eat only those animals that are ritually slaughtered. Nevertheless, it is best to make every effort to minimize suffering of the animal. Therefore, it is best for a meat eater to eat animals that have been properly slaughtered.
All right, so this is, again, what the proper conduct, like we said, that there are things that you are commanded and there are things that are highly recommended. And even those things which are highly recommended happen in stages, in gradations, when the time is right. And while we are not looking for loopholes, it is silly for us to not understand the differences, what the requirements are. And in each person in their situation, in their context, needs to be able to utilize their halachic toolkit, specifically their Noahide halachic toolkit, to navigate these things. And again, stressing what I said earlier, why it's of course important, if there's doubts, if you find yourself not sure, ask the community, ask the group, ask us, so we can work together, so we don't have to feel alone in trying to navigate this new world, this ancient wisdom in our new modern world. Of course, also with regards to these recommendations, since kosher slaughtering is generally looked at as one that tries to minimize as much as properly the suffering done to the animal, and there's been studies about this. That's why, if possible, you should ask for the kosher food, because then at least you are taking part of a process that is less barbaric and taking into consideration the sensitivity of the holy beasts. It is best to avoid cruelty towards any living creature, and one should not make them suffer, and should have mercy on them. Included in this behavior are not. I'm sorry, I'm just going to scroll down a little more. Yes, not to slaughter an animal and its offspring on the same day. Not to do any work such as plowing with animals of two different species, not to muzzle an animal to prevent it from eating agricultural produce associated with the work, threshing. Okay, so I'll start with the last one. Threshing is, unless you guys know what threshing is. Yeah. Okay, so threshing is in sometimes the wheat or different things that are grown, there's a hard shell. And you want to break the shell out, but it takes a lot of effort. So they lay down these shells all over the floor, and then they have a piece of wood, like this platform on it that has like these pebbles on the bottom. And then they have, there's a pole in the middle, and they have the animal sort of walk around, and its weight crushes all these shells. And then you remove the platform and you take out all the seeds inside. Now, while the animal's doing this, seemingly some of these are popping out from underneath, and he could eat them because they're right in front of him. And you'd be like, but I'm going to lose X% on what he's eating right now. Comes the Torah and says, you can't be doing that to the animal. Obviously, this is very different, but we also spoke about this, if you recall, a few weeks ago with regards to stealing. If I'm someone working in your field and I'm peeling apples, I'm going to be able to take one of those apples and eat it for myself. I can't save it. I can't collect the apples and then sell them on eBay the next day or in the farmer's market. But you cannot prevent me, or the Torah saying, a human holding food in his hand right now and about to eat it, you can't tell him, no, you can't eat that. Same like with the animal, which here we're saying too, if the food is in front of the animal, it's too cruel for us to be like, no, sorry, you can't eat it. The attitude is you have to let him, at the very least, experience that, because otherwise it's torture for him. He's going to be seeing food and he's just going to keep on smacking his head down there. Not to work. Obviously, we have Shabbat, right, where your animals are, we need to have them rest. And of course, we have to take that, how mind-boggling and how innovative that was at the time, saying that your animals are going to rest as well. How amazing the Torah is. And here too, it's saying that I'm going to take my ox and I'm going to take my donkey, and they're going to both plow my field together. This is going to create an imbalance. The bull's going to run, the donkey's going to drag behind. So and this is also something that we could just learn in general. Obviously, cockfighting, obviously dog fighting, obviously fights between smaller and larger animals. So all these things the Torah says you of course you must avoid. And as far as not slaughtering an animal and its offspring on the same day, this too is just for ourselves, to preserve our humanity, to recognize that it could be, and again, we might find out that there are feelings and there is a recognition, right? We know now that elephants could come back a few years later to a place where another elephant from their tribe, or from, I don't know what it's called, a group of elephants, but I think it's called a crew. No, but these elephants are all together and they go back to the place where the elephant dies, and they just stand there like in a circle, sort of like, sitting Shiva in a certain sense. So it's quite remarkable. So we have to be very sensitive to that. We also see this in a commandment we have called Shiluach Haken. If I want to eat eggs from a bird, right? So I have to first shoo away the mother. She can't see me taking the eggs right in front of her and her to feel helpless. Rather, I kick her off so she gets frightened and goes away. Then I do it that she doesn't see it. Because we want to, again, even for ourselves and for God, to remind ourselves that we are not doing this because we are just impulsive and we're animals. Rather, yes, we might need sustenance, or yes, I might need this for a sacrifice, but I'm going to do so in the most humane way as possible. Yes. The sages were uncomfortable with the idea of using animals for games or sport because they suffer from activities, I guess I could have just waited, such as in bullfights or hunting for sport. So there you have it. And again, this is in the proper conduct, right? So in theory, Noahides can participate in this, but we are being called, all of humanity is, and specifically those who are following in Hashem's footsteps, to try to avoid such behavior. Whoever finds a nest and wants to take, this is what I just referenced, the chicks and the eggs that are in it, must first chase away the mother and then take it away in order that the mother should not see her offspring being taken away. But it is better not to take them at all, right? Obviously, you go to the store, they'll be running around just snatching eggs. It is proper to eat meat, or it is not proper to eat meat or drink wine to excess, right? So this is what we're talking about, the fast food culture. Is this the world we want to be living in, where this is what's always happening every time? Barbecues constantly. Blood from a slaughtered, undomesticated animal or from a slaughtered bird should be covered with the earth, right? We don't want the blood to be spread out there. Again, while others might take it to an extreme and try to utilize this blood, we are at the very least recognizing the divinity in it, but of course, because of that, want to respect that and not take advantage of it. Whoever wants to be strict with himself and eat only kosher foods according to the laws of Judaism can do so, and may even accept upon himself the prohibition of the laws of kashrut. And here are some of those laws. Not to eat trefa, unfit meat, that is meat from an animal with a fatal defect, right? So there's different types of kashrus foods that people also eat. One where we know none of their lungs have any defects on them as well. Then there's different levels of how people look at these things. Not to eat animals or birds that died without being slaughtered by human beings, right? That you just find like on the side of the road, even if they're kosher. Not to eat any of the animals forbidden to Jew as they are listed in the book of Leviticus. And we have the whole list over there. Obviously, many cattle and animals like that we could eat. Many birds we could eat. We don't eat any birds of prey. Fish, there's a lot of fish we could eat. Once we get to more the exotic animals, fish, sea life, we're very limited. Lastly, not to eat meat mixed with milk or dairy products. Is that? Yes, that's chapter 9. Wow. So just with regards to the eat milk and dairy products, which is like a famous one. So the Talmud talks about, but first of all, it's lotev vashal gdiba chalavimo, right? You're not having a calf in his mother's milk, right? So here too, we're talking about something that's too intense to think about, right? Like I'm eating this animal, and I took the mom and the son, and I'm eating both. It's like I'm completely taking advantage of this whole situation over here. So the Torah wants to make sure you have this separation. In the mystical teachings of Kabbalah, we are told that meat is slaughtering, taking, and seen as justice, as din, the concept of din, or the one of the 10 emanations of spheres, and milk is the milk that the baby is drinking is giving, and this is considered chesed, another one of these spheres, and the idea is that we have to recognize not to blur the lines between justice and chesed. Both are very important, but these lines can't be blurred. We have to create some sort of balance. We also have this, of course, with tzitzit, with the fringes, what the kind of the wool they're made out of, and generally speaking, we don't want to mix them, but they can be mixed only by the priest who wears it in his clothing in the temple. That's a place where you could have a proper balance of caste and order, so to speak. Either way, practically speaking, the halakha has different opinions. The Talmud talks about 1 hour or 6 hours between meat and milk. Later on in halakha, we are introduced to 3 hours. Then there are interpretations. What does an hour mean? Is it 5 hours and 1 minute, as in it's into the 6 hours? So there are different opinions, but ultimately the idea is to be cognizant of the separation. And at the very least, you're not eating the cheeseburger. Rather, you would have your burger, stop, make a blessing, recognize, orient yourself with the food you've just eaten and be thankful for that. And maybe it's 10 minutes later and you're having your milk or you're having your ice cream. But the idea was to create that separation and recognize why I'm separating these things. And it's not because it's aside from showing self-control, there's on the sensitivity and humanity level with that which we're trying to show compassion towards these animals. And then there's, like we said, there's like there's another level to this, which is what these two things symbolize, which we said justice and chesed, which are two attributes that we obviously want to constantly be maintaining, but we don't want to blur them. We don't want to be over pious and give of ourselves and lose ourselves by just giving and giving and giving. We don't want to be too harsh and just seek justice, even for those who actually need more compassion and kindness. I hope you guys don't feel like I rushed through this. However, this one was sort of allowed us to go through it fairly quickly. Any questions, thoughts, comments, reservations, complaints?
I mean, I guess just a comment, but it just seems like a lot of this stuff is going over. It's less about, like you said earlier, loopholes and just everyone's coming from a different place, different direction. And so it's just listing all the things that are permissible and the things that aren't. So,
Correct. And exactly.
And that's how it should be understood. Not
That's right.
yeah.
And what was the last thing you said? And that's how?
That's how it should be understood. It's not like, oh, I can do this, but maybe it's not a good thing that you should do what's permissible given your situation or your specific situation.
Correct. As Paul said, right? Everything's permissible, but not everything is worthy, or not everything is proper, right? So, like, that's the sense of. We spoke about this in the past, maybe pretension in the intro, but this was part of the rub, obviously, with the difference with why it's so important for Maimonides that the Noahide laws are being kept, not due to the logical, not because it's sensical, rather because you are commanded to do so. Now, you could be commanded to do so, and then at that point, understand also why it also makes sense. However, the Gemara talks about how someone who is commanded and does so is rewarded more than someone who is not commanded and does so. And you would ask, but why? Someone that's doing so, like, and it wasn't commanded, so isn't that a higher level? And again, that is sort of alluding in a certain sense to what happened with our Christian brothers, where there was a sense where everything became permissible, right? And then they decided to do everything. And the attitude is to do these things because you are commanded to do so, and you are accepting that yoke in a certain sense. And you're not looking to release yourself from these things. Rather, these things allow you to be oriented. And as we had in the last 2 weeks ago in the Torah reading of Jethro, where we receive the 10 commandments, we say Naaseh v'nishma. We will do and we will hear. In the terms we use today in this little corner, it would be, I'm first going to embody the practice, and I'm first going to act and participate in it. And later on, I'm going to allow it to actually start making sense in a certain sense. But I'm not going to wait till I have this whole schematic broken down and explained to me, and every I crossed, every I dotted, and every T crossed before I move forward with this practice. Rather, I'm deciding to believe in the embodiment of this practice. And later on, by doing so, I will start to understand. And on that note, I leave you guys with a blessing of a good week, clarity and tranquility, love and health to your family.
Thank you. Thanks for the class.
Catch you guys later.
Bye.
Awesome dudes and girl and lady. Oh, yeah. What is that comment? Stem cell. Oh, it's still running. Bye.